Here's what every HVAC company will tell you. If your house turns dangerous in July, you need a bigger machine. Here's what the numbers actually show. They say cooling starts with a compressor. The United States Department of Energy says water moving across a saturated pad can cut incoming air by 15 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. They say comfort must be manufactured. The data says part of it is already built into evaporation, airflow, and shade. They say summer relief costs money. The Energy Information Administration says air conditioning alone takes 19% of household electricity use in American homes. They sell you tonnage. Physics gives you a temperature drop first. They say the answer lives in copper coils and sealed refrigerant. Your own skin says otherwise. When sweat evaporates, your body sheds heat without a compressor, without a condenser, without a service call. Same body, same physics, same summer. They say a hot room needs colder machinery. The Department of Energy says an evaporative cooler can use about 1/4 as much energy as central air. They say the bill is unavoidable. The numbers say the bill got normalized. And once you see that gap, you cannot unsee it. Because the lie was never that compressors work. They do. The lie was that they were the only serious answer. I accepted that for years. You probably did too. Most people do. A hothouse shows up and you think in equipment. Bigger unit, higher SEER, cleaner ducts, more refrigerant. Then the first heat wave hits, the attic loads up like an oven, and the machine runs longer than your patience. But the old answer never left. It was still there in plain sight, in wet cloth, in shaded intake air, in detached heat sources, in low rooms, in basements, in spring houses, in summer kitchens, in the simple fact that moving air across water steals heat before that heat ever reaches your lungs. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you a 3-ton replacement. Because if you can drop incoming air before the room loads up, the whole argument changes. Your walls absorb less, your furniture absorbs less, your attic gains matter less. Your body stops fighting both radiant heat and stagnant air at the same time. That is not folklore. That is heat transfer. And the part that should make you angry is this. The performance gap is measurable. The operating cost gap is measurable. The history is measurable. Yet you were trained to think of cooling as a purchase, not a design decision. The reason you were never told the real number is the same reason this system was written out of the building language in the 1930s. Someone had a very good reason to keep you in the dark. What I'm going to show you is simple. A strip of $4 to $7 muslin, a saturated pad, and a fan drawing shaded air can change what a July room feels like before your central system even wakes up. And yes, this works, even if your house was built 50 years ago. Stay with me, because what I found in Lancaster County uses the same physics the Persians used to keep desert spaces livable more than 2,400 years ago. The mechanism is brutally simple. Evaporation steals heat. The United States Department of Energy says evaporative coolers reduce air temperature by 15 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit when outside air passes across water-saturated pads. That is your body's own cooling system, scaled to a room. Sweat does it. A wetted intake does it. The air gives up heat either way. The Department of Energy also says evaporative coolers cost about half as much to install as central air and use about 1/4 as much energy. Put that in field terms. Call it an effective coefficient of performance. You are getting roughly 4 units of household cooling effect for every 1 unit of electrical input versus 1 unit from the conventional baseline the DOE compares against. The International Energy Agency uses the same coefficient language for heat pumps, and even a typical household heat pump lands around 4. That means a fan, a pad, and water are competing with machinery that fills a truck. Think of a car radiator in reverse. Instead of dumping engine heat into passing air, you are letting passing air dump its heat into water as that water changes phase. It never gets mystical. It never changes. The gap is physics. and that gap represents a massive market in equipment, replacements, filters, duct changes, refrigerants, and service every single year. And that is why you have never heard of this. The first time I stood in Lancaster County in August, I noticed what I did not hear. No condenser hum, no compressor kick, no frantic rush of treated air, just insects outside, a floor that stayed cool under my boots, and a house that felt lower in temperature than the road I had just left. I asked Eli why the lower rooms felt different so early in the day. He smiled and said, "You cool the air before you cool yourself." Then he pointed me toward the basement door and the shaded side of the house before saying another word. That sentence stayed with me. What I was seeing was not one trick, it was a chain of habits. Windows placed for cross-flow, shade held on the west side, heat-heavy work pushed into a summer kitchen, family time pulled down into lower rooms after noon. In Lancaster and Holmes County, families have used versions of that logic for 4 generations and longer. The knowledge came with immigrants from the Palatinate and Alsace, then stayed because it solved a real problem. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission's Lancaster Plains study documents spring houses, summer kitchens, and vaulted cool storage cellars across Lancaster County, including a spring house at the David Davis Farm in Earl Township around 1800. The record is there, it was always there. Go back farther and the pattern sharpens. In Yazd, Persian builders raised wind catchers over subterranean water and used pressure, height, and evaporation to push cooler air downward. The Dowlatabad garden wind catcher rises about 33 meters. That is not decoration, that is climate engineering. Ancient Egypt reached the same answer through the Malkaf, a wind-catching tower that intercepted moving air and directed it through shaded interiors. Researchers tracing that tradition place early wind-catching technology about 3,300 years back. Same heat, same air, same human body. They did not share a contractor. They did not share a rebate program. They shared exposure to deadly summer heat, and they solved it by watching what water and moving air were already doing. The Amish didn't read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the body was already doing. Every civilization that mastered deadly heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from the Palatinate to Pennsylvania 289 years ago and kept building it because it worked and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. Now you get to the part that should bother you. In 1929, Frigidaire introduced a split-system room cooler for homes. In 1930 and 1931, General Electric built 32 self-contained room cooler prototypes. The decision was obvious. Home heat was no longer a design challenge. It was a consumer market. By 1947, 43,000 window air conditioners were sold in the United States. By 1952, that number hit 360,000. Every house cooled by shade, airflow, water, and detached heat was a house buying less equipment. The mechanism of suppression was not dramatic. That is why it worked so well. The profession changed its language first. A SHVE wrote a model code in 1914 around ventilation minimums. Then the culture of design shifted toward mechanical conditioning as the default answer. ASHRAE's own industry history says it plainly. The expansion of air conditioning in the 1930s made natural ventilation obsolete. Once that sentence became the mindset, summer kitchens, shaded intake planning, sleeping porches, transoms, shutters, and water-led cooling stopped looking modern enough for the drawing set. Not because it failed, because equipment margins were better. The named beneficiaries are all right there in the record. Sackett Wilhelm's Lithographing and Publishing Company gave Willis Carrier his first famous commercial problem in 1902. Carrier Engineering turned controlled air into a scalable business. General Electric and Frigidaire turned it into household inventory. Then the code and standards world gave mechanical systems the prestige of inevitability. Publishing proved the problem. Industry sold the answer. Regulation taught you which answer counted. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building language, and practical household instruction, not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. And the pattern did not end. In the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code fight, appeals led by the National Association of Home Builders targeted stronger efficiency gains that would have cut loads and lowered bills. On March 3, 2021, the International Code Council Board eliminated the governmental member consensus vote for future IECC cycles. In 2022, the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $964,622 on federal lobbying. Smaller loads mean smaller systems. Smaller systems mean less equipment revenue. The motive did not disappear. It got organized. The U.S. HVAC systems market is worth tens of billions a year. Every alternative installed is tonnage that never gets sold, replaced, financed, or serviced. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people with land, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to rip out your existing system. You need a weekend. Start on the shaded side of the house. East facing is best. North facing is next. Set a 20-inch box fan in the lower half of the window, then build a simple intake frame from 1x3 pine so a 24x24 x 2-inch cellulose evaporative pad sits tight against the fan face. Stretch one layer of muslin cotton across the outside of that pad. That cloth is the cheap part. Usually $4 to $7 a yard. It slows dust, spreads water, and keeps the first surface evenly wet. Across the top of the frame, run a 1/2-inch Schedule 40 PVC header with 1/16-inch holes drilled every 2 inches. Feed that header with 1/4-inch clear vinyl tubing from a 5-gallon HDPE bucket or tote set at least 18 inches above the sill, or from an 8 to 12 watt fountain pump if you want recirculation. Keep the pad face 3 inches off the glass. Keep the lower tray pitched at a 3% slope so runoff returns cleanly to the reservoir. Seal the side gaps with foil-faced polyiso or low-E radiant foil. Air leaks kill performance. Cellulose pad is not optional. Polyester batting causes mildew and chokes airflow. If you want the best result, do not aim it at the hottest room first. Aim it at the room that feeds the rest of the house. The hallway, the stair base, the room beside the kitchen. Let the intake create pressure and let warm air leave from upper windows on the opposite side. The Department of Energy says to provide 1 to 2 square feet of opening for each 1,000 cubic feet per minute of cooler airflow. That matters. Parts stay cheap. The fan runs $28 to $44. The pad runs $18 to $29. The tubing and PVC runs $7 to $14. The pump runs $16 to $27. The bucket runs $7 to $12. The foil and lumber run $22 to $40. Even with screws and seal tape, you land around $102 to $173 total. One Saturday morning if you move fast. 2 weekends if you want it tidy. On a 95-degree day, this setup produces air at the pad face that is commonly 15 to 22 degrees cooler than the air you started with. That is enough to change the entire feel of a heat-loaded room before sunset. Maintenance is simple. Check the pad, tray, and reservoir once a month, and replace or wash the pad once or twice in the cooling season. Your conventional central air costs $6,000 to $11,500 to install, $74 to $186 per summer month to run, and lasts 15 to 20 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $102 to $173 total. It lasts 3 to 6 years for the fan and far longer for the frame. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel root cellar food storage, lime wash heat control, rainwater kitchen resilience. I've put it all in one place, step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. It's not named yet, link is in the description, but stay here. Because what Eli built is the part nobody is talking about yet. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state and your highest summer power bill in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1935 USDA farmhouse bulletin reveals about keeping kitchen heat out of the living quarters with nothing but stone, airflow, and placement. And the old record that proves rural housing experts knew the answer decades before selling you more indoor load. You're not going to want to miss that one.